We've been talking about healing, wholeness. How many people feel wholer? Wholer? Yeah. This, really, that's the message of that song, really, All Is Well With My Soul. We're talking about wholeness, and we're really talking about the essential nature that we all have. We oftentimes misunderstand wholeness if we limit it to the externals in life, or what our body is going through. Of course, we all want to have healthy bodies, and we'd like our bodies to be expressing wholeness, and we do what we can in that regard. But because we're really here to understand what is the spiritual message behind that idea of wholeness, then it becomes a much deeper consideration and a much deeper exploration that we're really on here for this period of time that we're on this series. And I just want to loop back again to week 1 just briefly, because it's important that we have the foundations of from what the rest of the teachings really come from. So just permit me to review here for a moment. We're talking really about spiritual healing, as I mentioned. It's not just about physical healing. It can, of course, express in that way, but spiritual healing is much deeper. It's a process by which we become whole. And again, because we are already whole, it's somewhat of a paradox when we say becoming, the process by which we become whole. It's really the process of discovering, experiencing, and expressing our true nature, which is wholeness itself. So that which is already so does not change, but in the process of the work that we do, we may experience, we may express, we may have a realization of that which is already true about us. And that way we can bring what is, the unconscious, or that which is below the awareness that we have around who and what we truly are, bring that into the conscious mind so that we have an experience of well-being. It's one thing to say, all is well with my soul, if you're not experiencing that, right? So we're here to bring forth the truth about our being, the truth of our wholeness. And that's what we're doing. That's all we're doing. We're not trying to make ourselves whole. We're trying to reveal the wholeness that we already have, and we are. So spiritual healing makes visible the wholeness that lies invisible within each one of us, making visible the invisible. And the premise behind all of this is our foundational principles in unity, that there is only one presence and one power, what we call God the good, omnipotent. One presence, one power. And that is what is behind all of this, and that we are expressions, we are extensions, we are chips off the old block, if you will. We're microcosms of the macrocosm. We're expressions of the one life, the one love, the one peace, the one joy. That's what we are. We are not separate from the divine in the way that maybe the old-time religion was talking about, that there was a God up somewhere out there, and that we are here, separate and apart from that divine. We believe that we are continuously connected with this divine energy, and that we are expressions of it, not always remembering, not always experiencing, and not always expressing. But when we get right down to it, and that's the purpose of spiritual healing, we are that, and then we can experience that. So does that make sense for now? Okay. And then the last thing that we've been saying, which is as a reminder, sort of to distinguish between the human experience and the spiritual truth, is that humanly we can be sick and poor and unhappy. But spiritually, as spiritual beings, we cannot be sick, poor, or unhappy, because we are wholeness itself. Many of you know that, is this making some noise? No. It's me. There's a noise in my head, and good thing that you don't hear what's going on in my head right now. There's this crackling rose going on here. So this notion that we can be sick, poor, and unhappy at the human level, but we cannot be at the spiritual level, seems to be a conflict or a contradiction. And yet we just have to understand that we are multidimensional beings. At one level, if we look around the room here and we see ourselves, most of us just perceive our humanness. We see the skin and bones representation of this self that we are. And of course, as Jesus and every other master teacher taught, we are not to judge by appearances if we are really to understand the reality. If we understand the true reality of our being, then we must see beyond the skin and bones, the the apparent reality of our being, and recognize the life, the truth, the wholeness, the energy, the invisible realm of being. And that takes practice. It's really a journey without distance, but it does take practice. And practice is what moves us from the ordinary mind, ordinary perception, into spiritual understanding, spiritual perception. It is really more of a, as I was talking about last week, it's really more about allowing the ordinary human perception to soften. You know, because our human gaze oftentimes makes very hard three-dimensional pictures for us and does not see beyond to the fourth dimension or whatever dimension that we are in the spiritual realm. So we have to soften our gaze. We have to see what we see, but then know that there's more than what we see. Was it Einstein who said, in order to do the impossible, we must see the invisible? And I think if what seems impossible to us at the spiritual realm, which is to understand that we are already healed, we're already whole, we're already abundant, then we do have to see differently. We do have to see differently, and that's the calling for us. This week, we're going to jump into a topic that is a powerful topic and oftentimes can be misunderstood, and if misunderstood, harm can come from the application of this responsibility idea. We're talking about responsibility, and rightly understood, it can be an aid in our healing process, and if it's misunderstood, it can delay our healing and it can increase our suffering. I'm going to say that again. If we understand this idea of responsibility in regard to spiritual healing, it can be an actual aid in our healing process. It can foster our healing. But misunderstood, it can delay our healing and it can actually cause an increase in our suffering. So we know that we want to understand this correctly, and I'm going to take a little time today to talk about that, because oftentimes in New Thought and Unity and religious science, science of mind, there is this notion that sort of takes responsibility to the nth degree and almost makes it a fundamental notion, fundamental meaning that's just the way it is, and there's no nuanced understanding of it. It's either this or that. So we're going to talk about that today. So let's talk about two ways of looking at responsibility. There's one way is that no personal responsibility at all, which obviously would be the other extreme, the extreme of I'm not responsible for anything. Illness, life happens to me, right? Happens to me. And we are victims of life. And many of us have been there. I have been there. Many of you maybe have been there as well. And when we are in that state of mind that I'm not responsible at all, then the cause and the cure is completely external to us. The cause and the cure is completely out there somewhere. The virus caused the illness, and somebody else caused me to be upset. We realize this one, right? And we don't have any understanding of how we are integral to the experience that we have in life. It feels like, here I am, and then life is just coming at me, and I have no relationship to this life. That's no responsibility. And that's usually sort of the feeling like, like you're nothing more than like flotsam on the waves of fortune and misfortune, just bobbing about there. And however the waves go, that's how your life goes, or the winds of fortune and misfortune, and you're just sort of at the whim and fancy of how life shows up. That's no responsibility. We take no responsibility for our healing when we feel that way. We must completely rely on external healing agents, such as medicine, surgery, divine intervention. That's a popular one. Other people need to change so that we can feel better about ourselves. You get it. You're smart. You get it. So that's on the end of the spectrum of no responsibility at all. Now remember, we're going to talk about a nuance here. So we're not trying to camp in any one of these places. So we're going to go to the other extreme now. This is, I'm completely responsible for my life. And I'm completely responsible for everything that happens. And this is a metaphysical paradigm that underlies this, that says the origin of all dis-ease is in the mind. Metaphysics has an idea that all dis-ease starts in the mind. And that all external events are a result of our thoughts, our beliefs, and our emotions. Are you familiar with this? Some of you are, yeah. This view sees a person's life as a reflection of his or her, do you know the word? C word. Consciousness. Consciousness, which would be sort of the sum of all your thoughts, beliefs, emotions, etc. That your life is a reflection of consciousness, and that a false belief or a negative emotion will eventually manifest as a malady in one's life. But a false belief, in other words, one that's disassociated from the truth of your being, held in your mind, will manifest in some way that will result in some kind of a malady, whether it's an illness of the body or mind or whatever. This sees healing not as coming from an external agent, but from a change in one's attitudes, beliefs, and emotions. So I'm completely responsible. Okay? Are we following? I'm going to run through this pretty quickly today, and if you have cards and letters you want to send me later, which I expect, that's absolutely fine. But we've got to shorten the service, this first service, a little bit, because we have a ritual at the end of the service today that we want to make space for. But I do have notes, and I can send them to you. Unusual day for me. That's to help me keep me on track. Okay, so those are the two extremes. And now we understand now that there's some nuance here that's probably like Buddha would call the middle way. And this is what I would suggest that you think about. But before we go there, let's talk about some of the downside of being completely responsible, because this is the one that's oftentimes, I think, misused or misunderstood in New Thought and in metaphysics. Particularly, if we feel we're completely responsible, this can be interpreted as to blame or guilty, and it can lead to shame. Especially if we judge any kind of dis-ease in our life as bad, right? Now, we can have dis-ease in our life. Whether we decide it's good or bad is a decision that we make. But if we decide that that's bad, you know, even though we don't like it, we don't have to call it bad. That's a judgment. If we call it bad, and then we think that it's all as a result of what we've been thinking, then what does that result in? Guilt, shame. Also, if I feel that everything that's happened to me is that I'm completely responsible for, then I can really mess up my relationships, right? And you can just see how that would work as well. The idea of responsibility was never intended to diminish us, but to empower us. This is what I want you to hear. This idea that we are co-creators with our reality was never intended to bash somebody over the head and make them feel small. It was meant to feel empowering instead of being a victim of life, knowing that you have a relationship with life in which there is a synchronicity, there is a co-creation activity that's going on, the extent of which may always remain a mystery to us, but to know that there is a relationship, that what arises, and I'll get into this more, what arises more rises up in and through my life, as opposed to me being the sole cause of what shows up in my life, is the nuanced, integral idea. The idea of causation of disease is, I consider, a slippery slope, and I never stand there. There's just too much that we don't know. You know, when someone says, and in all respect to people like Louise Hay, who write these books that are very linear in saying, you know, if you have a liver problem, it's you didn't forgive your father, and you know, this really clear, formulaic sort of understanding of the symptomology versus something that you did with your mind or your thoughts, or you haven't done with your mind or your thoughts, I think is problematic, because, you know, where do you stop tracking causes, right? If I didn't forgive my father, what's behind that? You know, maybe it was the way I was raised, and maybe I wasn't taught to be forgiving, and what goes before that? There is a whole sequence of causes, and if we just stop at one point and say, this is it, because that's as far back as I can access, then it may be convenient, but it's certainly not inclusive. So that's problematic for me. I stay away from concluding the cause for any disease because I don't know. We just don't know. I endorse the belief that we are response-able to how we respond to life's events. Response-able, ability to respond. One is I'm to blame, or so to speak, for what's happened. The other is I have the ability to choose how I respond when life does show up, regardless of its cause. Because you know what? The why is oftentimes the booby prize in life anyway, right? Why did this happen to me is oftentimes a spinning, descent into confusion, and it can lead to depression and everything under the sun, depending on how we conclude the reasons. Whereas how, and why, not why, but how, now what can I do? What can I use this for? Becomes, we get back into that empowerment for which this notion was originally intended. Life does not happen to me, it's not against me. If I have a realization that life is not against me, then I ask myself, what can I do with this situation? Now that it's here, regardless of the etiology of this particular circumstance, what now can I do? And I believe that some part of us is in agreement with life events. This is something that's, for some people, is difficult also. But I do believe some part of us is in agreement with life events, but not in a punishing way. But from the standpoint that from our deepest purpose is to know God. If we hold, and we do every Sunday, that our mission, our purpose in life is to realize our divine nature and to express our divine nature, if that is the way we hold life, if that is the way we hold our purpose, then we can understand how whatever shows up in life can be an opportunity for us to realize and express our divine nature, irregardless of what that event or circumstance is. Nothing can keep us from this higher purpose. Now, we may be delayed from some of the preferences that we have for life by circumstances, by illnesses, by setbacks, by difficulties. Absolutely, we may be humanly delayed, but we can never be spiritually delayed in our purpose to realize our divine nature, because our divine nature is always and absolutely present in the midst of all of life. Yes? It's absolutely 100% present, whether you're, healthy as a horse. Are horses healthy? I don't know where they came up with. Healthy horses. Well, there was one over the weekend that was extremely healthy. It's like, everybody's going to find out, what kind of hay was he eating? Maybe I'll put it in my shake in the morning. Anyway. Or you're sick as a dog. Are dogs always sick? I don't know. Somehow they get good rap, bad raps. Sick as a sick dog and healthy as a healthy horse. That's what I wanted to say. So when we understand that the level of health or sickness we have at the human level is not an impediment to our spiritual realization, then the purpose of life, we can understand that life events do not have to be seen as being against us. But life events can be seen as being for us, in the sense that there are certain circumstances, and I've had this in my life, and I know you've had this in your life. You've shared your stories with me. You have had these events in your life that had you not had those events transpire, you would not have taken the spiritual journey that you did. You would have not have had the revelation. You would not have had the realization. You would not have dug deep inside the soul, beyond the appearances of life, beyond the body, beyond what was showing up, beyond how much money you had, or how much success you had, or whether she loved you or he loved you not. You would not have done this deep work had those things in life not failed you. Yes? Because when life fails us, then we are forced to ask ourselves the question, then who am I now? Who am I without him? Who am I without her? Who am I without this money? Who am I without this job? Who am I without this success? And that can be for us because it takes us into a deeper identity search, which always results something more true than what we've been assuming. Does this make sense? We are here to realize who and what we are. There's no higher purpose than that. So the only time we can say that life or circumstances can be against us, if it's somehow, it would actually interfere with God's plan for it to be realized in you. Because I think the only purpose that the divine has, the only purpose, is that it pushes itself to be more of itself in you. And there is nothing and nobody that can be against that. And that's why the spiritual work takes some doing. It takes some falling to our knees sometimes, right? It takes us giving up our preferences. It takes us doing deep inquiry, asking the deeper question, so that we don't come away with this victim conclusion about life's events. We say, how could this be for me? You know, Jesus was not one who would go around and bash people over the head for their life events. There was one example where his disciples, who believed very much in karma, obviously, by saying, why was this man born blind? Did he sin or did his parents sin? Because, you know, there was only two choices. That this would only happen if he had sinned or his parents had sinned, in the mindset that says causation comes from your karma. And Jesus said, neither. This man was born blind so God could be glorified through him. There's always an opportunity for the divine to be glorified. There's always an opportunity for that realization of what we are to take place in and through life's events. When we realize that we have that kind of responsibility, you hear what I'm saying? That's the responsibility that we have, is to seek for the divine purpose. When I was here for the tryout, some of you may remember I did a workshop called Growing in the Cracks of Life. I had so many cracks that I'd fallen into that my workshop was about how to discover how to spiritually grow through setbacks and difficulties. And that premise alone, if you hold that alongside what's happening in your life, will aid you in your realization of who and what you truly are. It is holding the premise that you are here to realize and express your divine nature, and hold that in tandem with you're trying to reconcile the events of your life that are sometimes difficult, whether it's physical illness or whatever kinds of human conditions that we can have. We are here to realize that, and the circumstances of our lives can oftentimes be exactly what we need in order to support that mission and that vision. We need to have that mind in us that Paul said was in Christ Jesus. That's what we're after. We're after the enlightened perspective. You know, he said, I love what he said. He said, let this mind be in you, which was in Christ Jesus, who, having come from God, thought it not robbery to be equal. And you and all came from God. It's not arrogant. It's not blasphemous to assume that you are here to realize this Christ nature. And if that is your purpose, if that's what the whole divine life, the whole universe is conspiring to get you to see, if that's what's all behind the scene of all of the appearances of life, then wouldn't it be important for us to be on a lookout for how that might be true, even in this? So I'm going to commend that you consider this Q process. This is an opportunity for us to do some deep healing and to stop this incessant belief that many of us have that life is against us. It's so easy to feel that way, doesn't it? It feels like life's against us, and we've all had those moments. But life can only be against who you are not, because life is always for who you are. Life is always for helping you see why you're here and who you came here to be. And when you sit down and you do these processes of this workshop and you talk about who have I come here to be, you create a new divine reality, a new picture of what it would be to be expressing yourself as God created you on this planet at this time. And then you get to see how when you're coming from those beliefs that we all have, those shadow beliefs. I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, and all those things that would tend to, darken the doorway that can lead to our transformation and our spiritual growth. When we begin to see those things, we realize that those were beliefs that we decided were true. And very much like the particle in the wave, when we believe something like that, and we look at it through the quantum view, through the spiritual lens, we see that that's only one possible conclusion out of the field of infinite possibilities which the divine is offering you in every given moment. And if we choose to say, this person is against me, or this situation is against me, we have just locked out the field of infinite possibilities of all the ideas that we could have, mostly that life can be for you, no matter what shows up. So I commend this process to you. That's the reason we have taken the price. If the price point was an issue for anybody, we want you to have this teaching. Please come. We'd love to fill the chapel next Saturday. If it's about money, just come, show up. We'll figure that out. Denise is doing the facilitation. I have influence with her. But the church is really behind supporting this and taking care of the money issue, if that's it. But I know that many of you are here just wondering, what the heck am I doing in a Unity church? And I may have some coffee and go home, and I'm just thinking about this. And some of you are really on the spiritual path, and you're really ready to grow, and you're really ready to go to that next level. That's what this work's about. As Linda said so well, Joan's been through it, and the whole board's been through it. It's life-changing, and I would not say that lightly to you. So consider it. It's my last commercial announcement. Namaste.